Vivid verses.
The weekend it happened, I was sitting on the back patio of her family's house with a cold beer going warm in my hand, half listening to the birds working the feeder at the edge of the yard. Corinne had gone inside to help her mother with dinner, and her sister, Becca, was in the kitchen too. The screen door doesn't latch right. I'd offered to fix it twice, so it just rests against the frame, and through the mesh I could hear the two of them moving around, the clink of glasses, the low domestic noise of Sunday. I wasn't eavesdropping. That matters to me, and I want to be clear about it, even here where no one's keeping score. I was sitting in a lawn chair 6 feet from the door, in plain sight, doing nothing at all. The conversation drifted out to me the way smoke drifts. You don't choose to breathe it. I heard Becca say, "So how's the plan going?" I registered the word plan the way you register a sound that doesn't fit. Not alarm yet, just attention. Corinne's voice was lower. I almost missed it. 3 months in. It takes time. Does he have any idea? A pause. The sound of a cabinet closing. No, I need to keep it that way for now. He said he wasn't ready, but once it happens, he'll adjust. That's how men are, Beck. Once it's real, they step up. Becca laughed. Not a cruel laugh. Just light and conspiratorial. The way women laugh when they think they're being clever about something inevitable. You're moving things along. I'm moving things along, Corinne agreed. The beer was still in my hand. The birds were still at the feeder. Nothing about the yard had changed at all. I sat there for another 40 minutes while they finished dinner and called me inside. I ate. I complimented the roast. I helped stack dishes. I kissed Corinne's mother on the cheek and said I'd see her next time. I drove Corinne home, walked her to her door, told her I'd call her in the morning. I didn't kiss her goodnight. She didn't notice. The drive home was 22 minutes. I didn't turn on the radio. Here is what I knew by the time I pulled into my parking spot. Corinne had, for the past 3 months, been deliberately trying to get pregnant. She had done this without telling me. She had done this after I told her, clearly, calmly, at a dinner table with candles and good wine, 6 months ago, that I was not ready for that step. She hadn't argued. She hadn't pressed. She had nodded and said she understood, and then she had started moving things along. I sat in the car for a while. There's a version of this story where I go back inside and confront her that night. Bang on her door, voice raised, hands shaking. I've known men who would have done exactly that. Men who process shock through their throats, who need the room to know what they're feeling before they know it themselves. That's not me. It never has been. When I'm hit with something significant, I go quiet. Not cold, quiet. There's a difference. Cold is a wall. Quiet is a room with the lights on and every piece of furniture being measured. I needed to think. I needed to understand exactly what had happened, exactly what it meant, and exactly what I was going to do about it before I opened my mouth. So I went upstairs. I made tea. I didn't drink. I sat at my kitchen table until almost 2 in the morning. Let me tell you what I was actually doing during those hours, because it wasn't sitting in shock. The shock had lasted maybe 3 minutes, that brief, hollow moment where your chest drops and the world rearranges itself around a new fact. After that, I was working. First question, did I hear what I thought I heard? I ran it back. Not once, several times. The words were clear. The context was unmistakable. There was no charitable reframe that held water. It takes time. He said he wasn't ready. Moving things along. No, there was no version of that conversation that meant something innocent. Second question, was this a manipulation of a type I'd seen before, or something new? I thought about the last 3 months. I thought about small things I'd noticed and filed away without filing as anything significant. A change in the pattern of certain days, a warmth that had seemed like affection but that I now understood might have been something more tactical. I felt a cold, clean clarity move through me. Not rage. Clarity. Third question, and this one took the longest. What did I want to do? That's the question most people skip. They let emotion make that decision and then spend years trying to justify it. I wasn't going to do that. Here's what I came to. Corinne and I had been together long enough that she was not a stranger to me. She was not a bad person in the general ledger. She was warm and funny, and she made her mother's roast on Sundays, and she laughed too loud at bad jokes. I had loved those things about her. But what she had done was not a small thing. And I don't mean the attempt itself, exactly, though that was serious enough. I mean the decision-making that preceded it. The conversation we'd had 6 months ago, where I'd been honest and vulnerable and specific about where I was, what I needed, what I wasn't ready for. And she had heard all of that, looked at me across the table, and decided that my answer was an obstacle to be routed around rather than a truth to be respected. That's not a lapse in judgment. That's a philosophy. And the philosophy said, what I want matters more than what you've told me. I know better than your stated needs. Your agency is negotiable when it inconveniences my timeline. I cannot be with someone who held that philosophy. Not for a week, not for the rest of my life. But there was something I needed to do first. 2 days later, I called her on a Tuesday evening and asked if I could come over. My voice was the same as it always was. She said, of course, she just made pasta. There was plenty. I ate the pasta. I helped clear the plates. We sat on her couch, and she put on something to watch, and I let about 20 minutes pass. Let the room settle. Let her think this was an ordinary Tuesday. Then I said, can we sit at the table? I want to talk about something. She looked at me, a small assessment happening behind her eyes. Sure. We moved to the kitchen table. She sat across from me and folded her hands loosely in front of her the way she does when she's preparing to listen. I've always liked that about her. Present. Attentive. I looked at her for a moment. I need you to tell me what you've been doing for the last 3 months. The words landed and I watched her face. Not to catch her in something. I didn't need to catch her. I already knew. I was watching because how a person responds to that question tells you more than any answer they could give. There's a version of this conversation where she takes a breath and says, I've been doing something I should have told you about, and I'm sorry. That version requires a kind of honesty that I hadn't decided yet whether she was capable of. What she actually did. Her expression moved through 3 phases in about 2 seconds. First, a flicker of something, recognition, maybe, before it was controlled. Second, a careful neutrality. Third, a tilt of the head and a light, puzzled smile. What do you mean? I mean what I said. The last 3 months. What have you been doing? I don't know what you're asking. What specifically? There it is. She was going to make me name it. She was going to make me show my cards before she'd show hers. That's a tell. An honest person doesn't ask for clarification when the question is that general. An honest person, if they know what you might be asking about, leans toward the truth. They don't stall. I'm asking you to tell me, I said. I'm not going to narrow it down. She laughed a little, slightly incredulous, slightly warm. The kind of laugh designed to make the other person feel like they're being odd, slightly paranoid, easily reassured. Babe, I genuinely don't know what you're referring to. Can you just tell me what's going on? I sat with that for a moment. She was going to lie, not out of impulse or panic. She'd had 2 seconds to calculate, and she'd made a decision. She was going to hold the line and make me prove it. I don't know what she thought would happen next. Maybe she thought I'd push a little more and she'd stay vague, and we'd reach a stalemate, and eventually the conversation would die. Maybe she thought I'd eventually believe her confusion was genuine. Maybe she'd done this before with someone else, and it had worked. I stood up slowly. She blinked, recalibrating. That's 2 problems now, I said. Not 1. A pause. I don't. You do, I said. And that's okay. I don't need you to admit it right now. I picked up my jacket from the back of the chair. The first problem is what you've been doing. The second is that you just looked me in the eye and pretended not to know what I was talking about. I refuse to tolerate lies and deceit. I said it exactly like that. Not loud, not theatrical, I decided on those words 2 days ago because I knew I'd need them to be precise, and I'd turned them over long enough to make sure they were. She stood up fast. Hold on. Owen, wait. I'm not angry, I said, and I wasn't. That surprised her, I could see it. I'm also not going to argue. There's nothing to argue about. Where is this coming from? Her voice had changed. The composure had fractured, and underneath, it was something real. Not guilt, not yet, but fear. The kind of fear that comes when a person realizes the ground has shifted and they didn't feel it moving. You're not giving me a chance to... To what? She stopped. To explain. I looked at her steadily. Corinne, you didn't explain. You had a chance. I sat across from you, and I asked you a simple, open question, and you pretended not to understand it. That was your chance. That was the only thing I needed from this conversation. Just honesty. That's it. And you chose not to give me that. I didn't know what you were asking about. She said it firmly, standing her ground. I looked at her for a long moment. There's something almost fascinating about watching a person commit to a false version of events in real time. She wasn't flustered. She'd settled into it, built a wall in under a minute, and decided to stand behind it. Okay, I said. That made her angrier than anything else I could have said. Okay, that's it. That's it. So you're just going to leave? Just like that? You can't drop something like this and then just walk away without even... I'm not dropping anything, I said. I'm telling you clearly what I observed and what I've decided. That's more than you gave me. She crossed her arms. The fear had moved into something more familiar. A kind of controlled indignation that I'd seen her use before in disagreements, with friends, with her mother. The way she pulled rank on her own feelings by pretending they were about principle. You're being completely unfair. I might be, I said. I don't think so, but I could be wrong. Either way, it doesn't change what I saw. What you saw. Owen, were you even... She stopped, reassessed, tried a different angle. Softer now. Can you just sit back down? Please? Can you tell me what you think is going on, and I'll tell you if you're right or wrong, and we can... No, I said, gently, but without room for debate. I know what I heard. I know what it meant. And I know what you just did when I asked you about it. I don't need a second loop of this. You heard something. She said it with a measured skepticism, like she was identifying the flaw in my case. Like she'd found a technical vulnerability. So you overheard a conversation and decided, without asking me directly, without giving me a chance to explain, I'm giving you a chance right now. Silence. Tell me I'm wrong, I said. Tell me what you and Becca were actually talking about on Sunday. Tell me the plan wasn't what I think it was. Tell me what you've actually been doing for 3 months, and I'll listen. I mean that. She looked at me. It was a long beat. I watched her decide. This is insane, she said quietly. You're choosing to blow up our relationship over something you think you heard from a conversation you weren't even part of. There it was. Not a denial. Not an explanation. A reframe. A realignment of the story so that I was the problem. Paranoid, impulsive, destructive. You're blowing this up, as if the structural damage had been caused by my deciding to inspect it, not by whatever had been rotting underneath. I almost admired the precision of it. It takes a specific kind of presence of mind to pivot that fast, under that kind of pressure, to a version of events where you're the injured party. I'm not blowing anything up, I said. I'm describing what I found. And what exactly do you think you found? Her voice was steady now. Patient, almost. As if she'd decided this was a misunderstanding she needed to manage. I think you decided my answer wasn't good enough, I said, and you started working around it. I think you've been doing that for 3 months. I think that tells me everything I need to know about how you'll handle the next thing I tell you that doesn't suit you. She flinched. I kept going. Not cruelly, just clearly. You could have come back to me. You could have said, I want to revisit the conversation we had. I've been thinking about it differently. I need you to hear where I am. I would have had that conversation. I would have taken it seriously. That's how you do it. You don't just start acting unilaterally like my answer never happened. I didn't, she stopped, and I watched something change at her face. The strategy came apart. Not all at once. It happened the way ice breaks on a river, in sections, the underlying cold water showing through before the surface has fully given way. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes went slightly bright. When she spoke again, the performance was gone. I didn't think you'd ever be ready, she said. Quiet and raw. I thought if it just happened, we'd get there. Together. And I knew if I asked again you'd say no, and I couldn't keep waiting for you to. She stopped herself. She'd said too much, and she knew it. The room was very still. So you decided, I said. She looked at the table. Without me, I said. I love you, she said. It came out small, like she thought it explained something or absolved something, like it was a different conversation entirely. I know you do, I said, and I believed it even then. That's the thing about this kind of situation that nobody tells you. The love can be real and the betrayal can be real, and neither one cancels out the other. They just coexist in the room with you, two heavy, irreconcilable things. That's the part that makes it sadder. She looked up. You loved me, and you still decided my voice in this didn't matter, I said. That my answer was a problem to be solved, not a truth to be respected. And when I asked you about it just now, straight question, no tricks, you chose to lie to my face. Both of those things are true at the same time. And I won't build anything on that. So that's it, she said. I looked at her quietly. Yeah, just like that. It's not just like anything, I said. I've been thinking about this for 2 days. This is the most careful decision I've made in a long time. She laughed, a short, broken sound that didn't carry anything like humor. 2 days. You've been sitting on this for 2 days, walking around like everything was normal, and I had no idea. Yes, I said. I needed to think. I needed to be sure I was right and sure of what I wanted. I didn't want to do this in the car on Sunday night when I was still in the middle of processing it. She shook her head. That's so you. Just sitting there, calculating everything. Would you have preferred I showed up on Sunday night and screamed at you? She didn't answer. I wasn't sure she could. I picked up my jacket. For real this time. Not as an announcement, just as an action. The next thing that needed to happen. Corinne. She looked at me. I want you to know I don't think you're a bad person. I think you got scared and you made a bad decision, and then you made a worse one tonight. And some of this might be because you've never been with someone who called things by their right names. I paused, but I do call things by their right names. And what you did has a right name. She didn't ask what it was. Maybe she knew. I drove home. I didn't think about much. I'd done all the thinking already. There's something people don't understand about this kind of ending. The clean kind, the kind that happens because you looked at a thing clearly and said, no, that's not what I want. They think it must be easy because you didn't fall apart. They think composure means you didn't care, as if caring is only visible when it makes you loud. I cared. I cared about her, and I had cared about what we were building, and I had cared before Sunday afternoon about where we might end up. None of that vanished because I made a decision. It just stopped being the loudest thing in the room. The loudest thing in the room was what I'd heard through a badly latching screen door. He said he wasn't ready, but once it happens, he'll adjust. That's how men are. Not this one. I want to tell you about the call I got 3 days later because it matters to the story, and I'm not the kind of person who leaves things out just because they're uncomfortable. It was Becca on a Thursday morning. I was at my kitchen table with coffee. I was actually drinking this time, reading something I've been meaning to read for weeks. I let it ring 3 times before I picked up. Owen, she said. Becca. A pause. I could hear her assembling herself on the other end of the line. She told me what happened. Okay. I want to say, another pause. I'm not sure I should be calling, but I need you to know that I didn't realize. On Sunday, I didn't know you were outside. I figured, I said. It was true. If she'd known I was 6 feet away, she wouldn't have said it out loud. She wasn't careless by nature. I feel responsible, she said. You're not, I said. You didn't make the plan. You just heard about it. I should have told her it was a bad idea. Yeah, I said. You probably should have. She made a sound that was part laugh, part wince. I know. I know. At the time, it just seemed like she stopped. I don't know. She's my sister. It seemed like her problem to manage. It was, I said, until she made it mine. Silence. Is there any chance you'd? No, I said. She absorbed that. Okay. I'm not saying it to be harsh, I said. I just want to be straight with you because I think you deserve a straight answer. It's not a negotiation. I've made my decision. I know, she said quietly. I could tell, even from what she said. You sound like the same person. I didn't know exactly what she meant by that, but I didn't ask. We stayed on the line for another minute. Not talking, just in that particular silence that happens when two people have reached the end of something and neither wants to be the one to close it. Then she said, "Take care of yourself, Owen," and I said the same thing back, and that was the end of that. Here's what I didn't do in the weeks that followed, because I think it's worth naming. I didn't talk about it more than I needed to. A couple of close friends knew the outline. Not the full details, not the specifics of what I'd heard or how the conversation had gone, just the broad shape of it. We ended things, here's the general reason. I didn't need anyone to tell me I'd done the right thing. I already knew. Seeking that kind of reassurance seemed like a way of unsettling something I'd already settled. I didn't wonder if I'd been too harsh. Not because I'm incapable of self-doubt. I'm genuinely capable of it, and I think it's a necessary tool, but because I'd already done that work before I sat down across from her. I'd already asked myself the hardest version of the question. Am I wrong? Is there a charitable reading of this that I'm refusing? And I'd answered honestly, no, there wasn't. I didn't romanticize the loss, either. She had been good things, and this was a real ending, and I let it be sad for the amount of time that it was sad. Then it became something else, just a thing that had happened, a chapter with a clear final line. What I did do, I fixed a screen door latch that I've been putting off. Nothing metaphorical about it. It was just a thing on a list that needed doing, and the weekend after everything ended, I had time and energy, and I used them. I drove to the hardware store. I found the right part. I came home, and I installed it properly. Measured, level, flush, no wobble. The kind of job where when you're done, you test it 3 or 4 times just to feel the clean, definitive sound of it catching. It caught every time. About a month later, I was sitting in the break room at work on a late Tuesday afternoon, eating an apple and reading something on my phone, when a woman I'd seen around but never spoken to came in and started making tea at the counter. She moved with the kind of comfortable efficiency of someone who has been in a kitchen 1,000 times and doesn't think about it anymore. She made her tea, and then she turned around and saw me and said, "Sorry, I didn't realize anyone was in here," in the tone of someone who is genuinely unbothered by the fact. "It's a break room," I said. "You're allowed." She smiled, quick, genuine, no performance to it. Then she sat down at the other end of the table with her tea and went back to whatever she'd been doing on her own phone. I went back to mine, and we sat in companionable silence for about 10 minutes. Before she left, she looked up and said, "I'm Tara." "Owen," I said. She nodded, like she was filing that away for possible future use. Then she picked up her tea and went back out into the hallway. I looked at the door for a moment after it closed. I didn't do anything with that. Not that day. It wasn't a moment. It was just a moment, the ordinary kind, the kind that may or may not become something depending on 1,000 factors you can't predict from a single Tuesday in a break room. But I noticed it, and I filed away. That's how most things begin, I've found. Not with a collision or a revelation or a grand circumstance. Just a room, 2 people, and enough quiet to actually hear each other. The rest is deciding what to do next. and I've always been good at that.
Thanks for listening.